Hello friends, welcome to UGC EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Masood from Department of Geography, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. We shall discuss today about the measures of band ratio in remote sensing. The learning objectives of this module are to understand what the band ratio is, number 2, to understand spectral indices, number 3, reflectance characteristics of Earth's surface features, number 4, to develop an understanding of different indices. As you all know, pictures are the most common and convenient means of transmitting information. They portray spatial information that we recognize as objects. They convey information about positions, sizes, and interrelationships between objects. A digital remotely sensed image is typically composed of picture elements located at intersections of each row 1 and column j in each k bands of imagery. Associated with each pixel is a number that is known as digital number or brightness value that depicts the average radiance of a relatively small area within a scene. A smaller number indicated low average radiance from the area, and the high number indicates high radiant properties of the area. The figure 1 shows the structure of the multispectral image. Though we have talked about image enhancement, yet it is mentioned here in brief just as a recap. Image enhancement technique improves the quality of an image perceived by a human. These are applied separately to each band of a multispectral image in order to display or visually interpret the data more effectively. The objective is to create new images from original raw data in order to increase the amount of information that can be visually interpreted from the data. Image enhancement is attempted after the image is corrected for geometric and radiometric distortions. Now we start with the band ratioing. Band ratioing is sometimes differences in the brightness values from the identical surface materials are caused by various environmental factors such as topographic slope and aspect, shadow, or seasonal changes in sunlight illumination angles and intensity. These factors may limit the ability of an interpreter to correctly identify the surface materials or land use in a remotely sensed image. This ratio transformations can be applied to reduce the effects of such environmental conditions. Ratioing is the enhancement that provides unique information and differences between this spectral reflectance of surface features that are difficult to detect in a standard image. It is also useful to discriminate the soils from vegetation. A band ratio is a result of dividing each pixel of one band by the corresponding pixels of another band. Many researchers have developed many different band ratios over the years that exploit the specific reflectance properties of the surface materials. For example, vegetation has an extremely high reflectance in near infrared wavelength region relatively to red wavelength. The number of possible ratio combinations for a multispectral sensor with k bands is n is equal to k. Thus, for thematic mapper for 6 reflectance bands, the number of the ratio combination is 30, out of which 15 are original and other 15 are reciprocal. Ratio functions can be mathematically expressed as, that is given in equation 1, that is where BVij is equal to the output ratio of the pixel at the row and jth column. BVijk is equal to brightness value at the same location for band k. BViji is equal to the brightness value of the same location for band 1. The output ratio ranges from 0 to 255 since the value of BVij can be 0. These new numbers can be stretched or expanded to produce images with considerable contrast variation in a black and white condition. Certain features or materials can produce distinctive gray tones in certain ratios. For example, thematic mapper band 3, that is red, divided by band 1 to emphasize on red or orange colored features or materials such as natural hydrated iron oxide as light tones. 3-band ratio images can be combined as color composites which highlight certain features in distinctive colors. Ratio images also produce or eliminate the shadow effects. The figure 2 deals with the thematic landscape TM image of a region to show this kind of effects. Ratio images can be directly related to spectral properties of materials. Ratioing can be thought of as a method of enhancing minor differences between materials by defining the slope of the spectral curve between two bands. But we must understand that dissimilar materials having similar slopes but different albedo values can be easily separable in the standard image but become inseparable in a ratio image, which is shown in figure 3. The table 1 shows the spectral ratioing outputs of the selected parameters. The selection of a proper image and bands to use in the imagery has a huge impact to interpret the features in a particular image. The below mentioned list describes some of the features of 7 bands of Landsat thematic mapper imagery for detecting different features. For example, band 1, which ranges between 0.4 to 0.52 micrometer. This bands with short wavelength penetrates more than the other bands, hence it is preferred more in aquatic ecosystem. It is used to monitor sediments in the water, mapping coral reefs and water depth. Since the blue light is scattered more than other bands, it has the maximum noise of all the Landsat bands. The band 2, which ranges between 0.5 to 0.6 micrometer, has similar qualities to band 1 but not extremes. It is sensitive to water turbidity differences. It matches the wavelengths for the green features such as vegetation. The band 3, which ranges between 0.63 to 0.69 micrometers, senses in the strong chlorophyll absorption region and a strong reflectance region for most soils, and thus it is sometimes called as chlorophyll absorption band. This band can be useful to discriminate soil and vegetation in monitoring vegetation health. The bands 4, ranging between 0.76 to 0.9 micrometer, operates in the best spectral region in order to distinguish vegetation varieties and conditions. Since water absorbs nearly all lights at this wavelength, water bodies appear very dark. Band 5, which ranges between 1.55 to 1.75 micrometers, is very sensitive to moisture and hence is widely used to monitor vegetation and soil moistures. It has separated water body from barren and cropland. Light that is available in light gray tones. Since urban areas and vegetation have the same spectral response, it is difficult to distinguish between them. Landsat TM not able to distinguish between settlements and vegetation since it has same gray tone for both the features. Band 6 ranges between 10.4 to 12.5 micrometers is the thermal infrared band. It is a thermal band and hence is used to measure surface temperature. It is primarily used for geologic applications but is sometimes used to measure plant heat stress. It is used to distinguish clouds from soils since clouds tend to be very cold. It has half the resolution of the other multispectral TM band. Band 7, which has a range of 2.08 to 2.35 micrometer, has the ability to sharply separate land and water features and hence is also used for vegetation moisture. Generally, band 5 is preferred for this as well as soil and geological mapping. Let us understand how different band ratio combinations are used for the interpretation of particular features. Below is the sample image of Landsat TM of the area near Kota, Rajasthan, and the natural drainage is the Chambal River flowing between Kota district. It is being calculated as band 4 divided by band 3 in the near infrared. It enhances the presence of vegetation. The brighter the tones, the denser the vegetation. The below given ratio image shows healthy vegetation by bright tone while water body is seen in dark tones. Along with these features, line features such as roads are also clearly visible, which is shown in figure 7. Band 3 of Landsat TM showing the same area as in the previous figure. Band 5 divided by band 2, that is mid-infrared, which is green. This ratio can be used to detect the moisture level contained in the surface features. Darker the tone, the greater the moisture content in the surface features. Hence, water and soil moisture can be easily detected by this ratio. The above image shows the part of the Bhilwara and Kota districts from left to right. Band 3 divided by band 4, that is red divided by infrared, is being used for urban, water and line features like roads and drainage, which can be easily identified on this by applying this ratio. Water bodies are seen in brighter tone while vegetation is visible in dark black tone. The level of moisture, the level of water content is easily detectable in the imagery, which is shown in the figure 9. Apart from this, the ratio of band 2 to band 5, that is green by MIR, is used to detect water bodies, ratio 3 by 1 to detect ferric iron rocks, ratio 2 by 3 to sharply detect croplands and barren lands, while ratio 4 by 5 enhances the water body, vegetation and presence of moisture contents in the vegetation. In this combination, water body appears as dark tone and vegetation as light tone. Also, the ratio 7 by 2 separates forest from croplands but fails to discriminate between forests and water bodies as both appear as dark. It also enhances the highways, urban and built-up areas and croplands, and all of them appear in light tones. Aside from the above listed ratios, many other combinations are also possible with the thematic mapper sensor. Landsat TM uses different numbers of bands from those of Landsat MSS, SPOT and IRS. Let us talk about the spectral indices. For decades, various spectral indices have been used by scientists to predict, model or infer surface processes to assess and monitor several different land changes processes such as vegetation health and status, burn areas, fire severity, etc. This section describes the spectral responses of different Earth surface features, that is vegetation, soil and water, and various indices used in the field of remote sensing. Various spectral indices that are used to aid the interpretations of the imagery is broadly advanced in the following 4 stages. Initially, intrinsic indices were developed from simple band ratios which highlighted the properties of vegetation at different stages of plant growth. Secondly, indices were produced to compensate for background effects such as that caused in the areas in which the soil response dominates the vegetation. Thirdly, indices were used to compensate the effects of atmospheric distortion. And finally, new spectral indices were captured for the applications other than vegetation health, which includes burn areas assessment and fire severity. The reflectance characteristics of the Earth surface features. Spectral index criterion was used to maximize the sensitivity of certain features properties, that is biophysical properties of a plant. Normalize or reduce the effect of sun angles, viewing angles, atmosphere, topography, instrumental noises, etc. to allow consistent spatial and temporal comparisons. Link the specific and measurable surface processes such as leaf area index, biomass, APAR, etc. The spectral characteristics of 3 main features of the Earth, that is vegetation, water and soils, are shown in figure 10. Let us discuss the spectral characteristics of some features. For example, we start with the vegetation. The spectral characteristics of vegetation vary with the wavelengths. Spectral response of the healthy vegetation is minimum significant in the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum resulting from the pigments of the plant leaves. Chlorophylls strongly absorbs radiations in the red and blue wavelengths but reflects green wavelengths. The internal structure of the healthy leaves acts as a diffuse reflector of near infrared wavelengths, and thus reflectance dramatically increases in this region. Many plant stresses alter the reflectance in this region, that is within the infrared region, and sensors operating in this region are often used for detection of the stress vegetation. Let us talk about water. Water in the soil, vegetation or water bodies absorbs radiation at near infrared wavelengths and beyond. Reflectance from the water body can be due to the interactions of EM waves with the water's surface, that is called as the specular reflection. Number 2, with the material suspended in the water, and 3, with the bottom of the water body. Because of this, water bodies as well as the features containing water can easily be detected, located and delineated in the remotely sensed data. Clear water absorbs relatively little energy with the wavelengths less than 0.6 micrometer, resulting in the higher transmittance in the blue-green portion of the spectrum. Turbid water has a high reflectance in the visible region than clear water. This is also true for the water containing high chlorophyll concentration. The reflectance patterns are used to detect algae colonies as well as contaminations such as oil spills or industrial waste, etc. In case of soil, the majority of the radiation incident on the soil surface is either reflected or absorbed and a little is transmitted. Factors such as moisture content, soil texture, that is the concentration of sand, silt and clay, surface roughness and iron oxide present under the soil, and organic matter content affect the soil reflectance curve and act over less specified spectral bands. These factors are less dominant than absorptions features in the vegetation reflectance spectra. The moisture contained in the soil decreases the reflectance, which is observed maximum in the water absorption band at about 1.4, 1.9, 2.2 and 2.7 micrometer. Soil's moisture highly correlated with the soil texture. This kind of relationship is shown in figure 11. Spectral signatures can be obtained by measuring the energy that is reflected by targets on the Earth's surface over a variety of different wavelengths, and different features can be identified by comparing their respective spectral responses, which may not be possible or may be difficult if we compare them only at one wavelength. For example, water and vegetation have a similar response in the visible wavelength, but is different in infrared wavelength. Now let us talk about the vegetation indices. The ratio of near infrared band of red band is very high for healthy vegetation and is comparatively lower for poor vegetation. The resulting vegetation indices have been commonly used for the quantification of the greenness in the vegetation and also to quantify the biomass values. Following are some of the popular vegetation indices commonly used in the field of remote sensing. Number 1, we start with normalized difference vegetation index, popularly known as NDVI. The most common intrinsic index is the normalized difference vegetation index, which represents the vegetation graphically. It is used to assess the healthy green vegetation under the target being observed. The NDVI identifies the photosynthetic affinity or greenness through the reflective properties of chlorophyll and mesophyll layers within the plants. It compares the normalized differences of brightness values of near infrared and red bands. It might get affected by varying atmospheric conditions, illuminations, viewing angles and soil reflectance. Mathematically, NDVI can be represented as given in equation 2, that is NDVI is equal to NIR minus R divided by NIR plus R, where NIR is the near infrared band and R denotes the red band. The resultant NDVI values lie between -1 and +1, which can be classified from very sparse vegetation to very dense vegetation as shown in the table 2. The other one is the vegetation indices based on NDVI are extensively used to find the amount of the vegetation all over the world. As proposed by Groton in 1963, maximum of 10 days NDVI image can be used for crop forecast. The other important index is the Transformed Vegetation Index, popularly known as TVI. During 1975, produced a variant to NDVI by adding 0.5 to NDVI and taking the square root of the expressions, which resulted in the Transformed Vegetation Index, that is called as the TVI. It is mathematically expressed as equation 3, where TVI is equal to under root of NIR minus R divided by NIR plus R plus 0.5 multiplied by 100. This aids in range management decisions wherein TVI data correlates with the estimated forage level present in pastures contained in the remotely sensed satellite images. The third one of significance is the vegetation ratio index, popularly known as VRI. Another common intrinsic index is the vegetation ratio index defined by Wang in the year 2000. It is commonly referred to as simple ratio index and was developed to use with the Landsat MSS sensor. Equation 4 shows this kind of equation where VRI is equal to NIR divided by R. Similar to NDVI, it measures the level of photosynthesis processes in vegetation being observed. If both the NIR and R values are same or have a similar response, then the ratio value is 1 or close to 1. VRI values for bare soils generally are near to 1, that is 1.21 for bare dry soil and 1.33 for bare wet soil. VRI increases with the increase in the amount of vegetation. While VRI values are not bounded, it can be beyond 1. Effects of soil background on vegetation index: until the soil is fully covered with the vegetation, the soil background will influence the vegetation index. For incomplete canopies, the wetting of the previously dry soils and vice versa can cause a change in vegetation index. The change is further complicated by the fact that transmission of light through vegetation is considerably greater in NIR than in R band. Both the ratio and the linear classes of vegetation index rely on the existence of the soil baseline in the red and NIR wavelength spaces for soil normalization. The intercept of this line is close to but does not pass through the origin, and usually there is some scatter of soil points away from the principal soil line. Such secondary soil influences are most noticeable with red and yellow colored soils. And these two factors affect the discrimination of low amounts of vegetation from bare soils and are significant in the arid regions and in the early stages of the vegetation growth. The next indices of significance is the Soil Adjusted Vegetation Index, known as SAVI. SAVI was developed by Hewitt in 1988. He transformed the NIR and R reflectance axes in order to minimize the error obtained from the variations in the soil brightness values. For this, he proposed two parameters, that is L1 and L2. When added to NIR and R reflectance bands, reduces the variations caused by soil brightness. Mathematically, SAVI can be represented as SAVI is equal to NIR plus L1 divided by R plus L2 R. It may be NIR minus R multiplied by 1 plus L divided by NIR plus R plus L. It is shown in equation 6. Where L is a soil adjustment factor, it is 0 for low vegetation and 1 for high vegetation. Hewitt showed that optimal L values were obtained for different amounts of vegetations, but concluded that L is equal to 0.5 was optimal for the wide range of conditions. Although SAVI was developed using ground-based data, Hewitt and his colleague demonstrated that it successfully minimized soil background effects using satellite data. Several modifications have also been proposed over the years. For example, Steven in 1998 proposed the optimized soil vegetation index known as OSAVI, which is given by NIR minus R divided by NIR plus R plus 0.16. The development of improved vegetation index is an ongoing process. Major and others used model data in contrast to Hewitt's experimental data to adjust the RVI for soil background. Barrett and Goat discussed the potentials and limits of several VI for estimating leaf area index. The next indices of significance is the perpendicular vegetation index known as PVI. It can be used for the reduction of soil effects and developed by Rickarson and Weigand in 1977. This index indicates the plant development, which is based on the plot of the radiance value in the near infrared band to those in the visible red band. To better understand the PVI index, let us first understand the concept of the soil line. The soil has a specific spectral signature that differentiate it from other land cover features. The soil reflectance value increases with the increase in the wavelength in the visible and NIR region. However, it is affected by many different parameters. Soil moisture and organic matter affect the soil absorbing capacity, while soil texture and soil structure reflects the behavior of the soil. That is, whether the soil is a diffuse or Lambertian reflector. However, the reflectance of the particular soil type remains constant for NIR minus R relationship. Following is the plot of the red against the near infrared reflectance of same soil under different moisture contents. It is clear from the above plot that reflectance values of the soil for different moisture content conditions fluctuate proportionally and are correlated and have the linear relationship between them. The line showing this linear relationship is the soil line. The perpendicular vegetation index used the red and NIR bands to calculate the perpendicular distance between the vegetation spots and the soil line in the R minus R NIR plot. The vegetation has high NIR and low red reflectance values than the underlying soil, and thus vegetation spots will lie in the top left corner of the scatter plot. The increase in the vegetation density will move the vegetation spot towards the top left corner away from the soil line. This indicates that the pixel whose reflectance values are the corresponding spot that lie near or on the soil line corresponds to soil and not the vegetation. The limitation of PVI index is that it assumes that there will only be one type of soil beneath the vegetation. However, this is not true to most of the cases, as is the maximum number of soils available in the environment. For example, mixture of soil and rocks. To fix this problem, soil adjusted vegetation index, that is SAVI, was proposed by Hewitt in 1988. The other indices such as transformed soil vegetation index and modified soil vegetation index proposed different adjustment factors that better performed than SAVI in certain cases. Also, specific vegetation indices have been proposed in the past using high spectral resolution data and observing specifically at chlorophyll and plant vigor. The other indices such as transformed soil vegetation index and modified soil vegetation index proposed by the scientists have different adjustment factors that better performed than SAVI in certain cases. Also, specific vegetation indices have been proposed in the past using high spectral resolution data and observing specifically at chlorophyll and plant vigor. Let us talk about the atmospheric effects on vegetation index. Obtaining quantitative information from satellite data requires an accurate accounting of atmospheric effects. According to Switzer, atmospheric path radiance contributes to falsely low values of NIR divided by R ratio in Landsat data. Jackson and others examine the atmospheric effect on a number of vegetation indices by simulating Landsat MSS data for a data set comprising season-long reflectance measures over wheat. In general, both ratio and linear combination indices decrease with increasing atmospheric turbidity. In order to remove the effects of the atmosphere on NDVI, Kaufman and Tanner replaced the red band with linear combinations of red and blue bands. The index so obtained was entitled as Atmospherically Resistant Vegetation Index, known as ARVI, and is mathematically expressed as NIR minus RB divided by NIR plus RB, where NIR is B and R is the reflectance in the near infrared, blue and red bands respectively, and RB is equal to R minus Y within brackets B minus R, where Y, that is the gamma value, is the weighting function whose value depends on the aerosol type. Due to shorter wavelengths, blue band is much more easily scattered by the atmospheric particles than the red bands. Thus, the ARVI index takes the advantage of different scattering responses from the blue and red band to retrieve information regarding the atmospheric opacity. The difference between the reflectance of the highly sensitive blue band and the less sensitive red band acts as an indicator of different atmospheric conditions. Here, lambda serves as the weighing function for the difference of reflectance value for these two bands. There can be various chosen for this function, but according to Kaufman, it is best to select gamma values as 1 when information on the aerosol type is not available. Consequently, the main purpose of RB is to reduce the influence of the atmosphere, where a more accurate assessment of the red reflectance value can be obtained. The resultant value of this index ranges between -1 to +1. Aerosol-free vegetation index, that is AFRI, is another measure of indices. This model primarily uses the SWIR wavelength for the development of vegetation index. The SWIR band has both the advantage of being sensitive to vegetation while at the same time being susceptible to the influence of aerosols. This is because the wavelength is much larger than the radius of most aerosols, except for very large dust particles, which allows it to be more capable of circumventing the suspended particles. This index simulates the reflectance of the red band with the SWIR wavelength, that is, the value of the actual red reflectance is better calculated with the SWIR under the influence of aerosols. Even under the absence of any aerosol, this index could be a match for the NDVI. For various land cover types, these ARVI values are highly correlated with NDVI index. The correlation value may reach up to 0.98. The mathematical expression of AFRI is given in equation 9 and 10, where in the equations the subscripts 2.1 and 1.6 refers to the reflectance of different wavelengths in micrometer situated within the SWIR region, and NIR denotes the reflectance in the near infrared region. Both 2.1 and 1.6 are less affected by the absorbing atmospheric gases since they are situated within the atmospheric window. The index produces dynamical range similar to that of NDVI and AVRI, which is between -1 and +1. Reducing both soil and atmospheric effects, Pintiand in 1992 defined the Global Environment Monitoring Index, that is GEMI, to correct both soil and atmospheric effects reflected in equation 11 and 12, where P1 and P2 are the top of the atmospheric reflectance of the red and near infrared region respectively. GEMI was designed to be more sensitive to the changes in vegetation than in NDVI, but less sensitive to atmosphere. Another very important index is the measurement of water, and this is in the form of a ratio that is called as the normalized difference water index, popularly known as NDWI. Remotely sensed imagery has long been used in water resource assessment and coastal management. These applications have involved the delineation of open water using thematic information extraction techniques. There are various methods for the extraction of the water information from remote sensing imagery. One of the methods is through analyzing signature features of each ground target among different spectral bands, finding out the signature differences between water and other targets based on the analysis, and then using an if then else logic tree to delineate land from open water. The other one is a band ratio approach using two multispectral bands. One of them is taken from visible wavelength and is divided by the other, usually from near infrared wavelength. As a result, vegetation and land presences are suppressed while water features are enhanced. However, the method can suppress non-water features but not remove them, and therefore the normalized difference water index was proposed by McPhatters in 1996 to achieve this goal. The NDWI is expressed as in the form of an equation given at number 13, where green and NIR are the green and near infrared bands respectively. This index maximizes the water reflectance by using green wavelengths, which minimizes the low reflectance of NIR by water features and uses the high reflectance of NIR by vegetation and soil features. As a result, water have positive values and are enhanced, while vegetation and soil have 0 or negative values and therefore are suppressed. Many built-up land features also have positive values, and as a result, they are often mixed with the extracted water information. Wilson in 2002 proposed a normalized difference moisture index, that is NDMI, which had an identical band composite with NDWI. Both NDWI and NDMI detects the water vegetation liquid and thus are different from McPhatters' NDWI. Hope you have enjoyed the lecture. Thank you very much.